Welcome to the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast, the highly rated digital marketing podcast that provides weekly digital marketing tips and strategies from some of the world's top digital marketers and e-commerce entrepreneurs that will help you take your digital marketing to the next level. Sit back and enjoy this power-packed episode hosted by Arlen Robinson, who is an e-commerce entrepreneur and digital marketing expert with over 20 years of experience. Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own affiliate program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast, everyone. My name is Arlen Robinson, and I'm your host. And today we have a very special guest, Melissa Kwan, who is the co-founder and CEO of eWebinar, the leading webinar automation platform that saves you from doing the same webinar over and over for things like sales demos, onboarding, training, and thought leadership content. Welcome to the podcast, Melissa.
Thanks for having me, Arlen.
Yes, it's a pleasure. And thank you for joining me. I'm really excited to talk to you about webinars. It's really an area that I really haven't dived too far into on the podcast. We've talked about live video. We've talked about, getting out there, doing a variety of different interactive mediums to market your e-commerce business, but I hadn't really dived into webinars. Webinars I'm familiar with because I do webinars myself. I've been on several joint webinars, virtual summits, and the like. But I haven't really discussed it too much on the podcast. So I know you're definitely going to help navigate those waters with us and add value to how an e-commerce business can utilize webinars to benefit their business. But before we do get into all of that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and specifically how you got into what you're doing today?
Yeah, so my name is Melissa, and I've been in startups for, I guess, almost 13 years now. I used to say 12, but I think I've said it long enough that it's been 13. Right. It's my eWebinar is my third business. They're all in technology, all startups, and all bootstrapped. So we've never raised venture capital. We had some friends and family funding, things like that. My first two companies were in real estate software, and being able to scale webinars, like doing the same webinar over and over again, was a challenge that I had in my previous business. Okay. So because we were bootstrapped, we always had a very small team. So I was everything except for code. And so I was the one that was doing all the sales pitches, all the demos, all of the marketing. And then as we get a customer, all of the onboarding, all the training, and all of that was delivered through webinars, right? Back then it was GoToWebinar, now it's Zoom. I mean, it's the only way to get in front of so many people at once without hopping on a plane. Right. The problem with webinars is people love them, but they are just not scalable because someone, that was me, had to do them live. Right. And I was also digital nomading. So not only was I doing them around the clock, like sometimes I would do like 7 or 8 back to back of the same webinars, I was doing them on opposite time zones of my customers. So I always dreamt of this perfect solution that would do my job for me while I can go and have fun or sleep more or really just do anything else, right? Like it just didn't make sense to have a person do the same thing over and over, let alone, the founder of a company. Mm-hmm. So my previous company was sold in 2019. And this was just like an idea that just like I never let go of. It's like one of those things that like an itch you just have to scratch. Right. And so after that company was acquired, I decided like this was the problem that I wanted to solve. Was I wanted to save people from doing the same webinar over and over again.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah. What I've always seen time and time again on the podcast is when I listen to founders is that so many times the birth of a company comes out of a necessity that they've had as that co-founder, kind of in a previous life, in a previous situation, previous business venture. And then that's what kind of sparks the whole magic and the idea of a solid business plan. And this is exactly what you did, because like you said, with your previous company that you were with, you were saying, okay, there's got to be a better way. I can't always be, I can't be all in all places at all times. How can we improve this and automate this. And that definitely makes sense. And I can testify to the fact that doing a webinar, it definitely takes a bit of time and organization. Not only the setup, the promotion, all of that has to be, time has to be spent, and you can only do one at a time. And so the automation factor of it, I think, is very appealing, especially to e-commerce business owners that are very busy and probably wearing many hats. So it's really good to hear how your
I think if you think about like anything that's live, it just doesn't reach as many people.
Yeah.
Right. Why are we doing a podcast?
Right.
Because 3 years from now, somebody might be able to download this because they're looking for a certain solution or looking to learn something.
Yeah.
Right. Like what a live webinar is to an automated webinar is almost like what a radio show is to a podcast. Like, a radio show is great and it's fun and it's live, but once it's done, it's over.
Yeah, very true.
There's no way to get back to that. Like there's very, very limited reach, right? And so that's kind of a good comparison. I think a lot of business owners are, of course, looking to, especially nowadays, looking to do a lot more with a lot less.
Yeah.
And I think with the gig economy and things like that, people are starting to think like, how do I work less in my business? Right? How do I work more creatively and be able to create the freedom that I, started this business for?
Exactly. How do they work more on the business, not in the business? And this is definitely a tactic that can help them do that. Now, when we're talking about webinars, what I've kind of seen when I've approached other e-commerce businesses with webinars, have they thought about that as a particular strategy? I think the initial, I guess you could say the initial fear that a lot of businesses get is, I see that glaze over their eyes where they're like, all right, webinar, okay, what could I possibly do in a webinar? I'm selling a product. I'm selling wireless headphones, or I'm selling a sports nutrition drink. I'm selling whatever it is that they're selling. How could I possibly get value out of a webinar? And so, what do you think are some ways that they can come up with a topic that would not only be engaging to their current customers, but even prospective customers?
Well, I think that the super easy thing to do, like the low-hanging fruit, is you would take your FAQ, right? The frequently asked questions of your product. Like every product has an FAQ, right? Why are you better than the competition? How is this made? When does it get shipped? Right? Do you cover, do you have warranty? How long does that cover? Is it hard to set up? How do you set it up? All those questions. That in itself is your webinar, right? Because you want to be able to sell to someone without needing to talk to them every single time. That's the only way that you can scale your marketing and your sales, is if people are able to do their own research and have all those questions answered without having to wait for an email or wait for a phone call. You don't really want to take that phone call anyway, right? You've answered all these questions before. So it's just, I really see a webinar as a different way of delivering your FAQ that someone may or may not read. Right. It's just a different, it's not like once I do this, I don't have to do something else. Like nowadays, like you can't really dictate where people do their research, where and when they consume content. You can only be there when they're looking.
Right.
And I think as a business owner, what you want to do is to have more information out there than your competitors. Right. When your prospect is doing research, I want to have more information available than my competitor. Because that also builds trust and credibility. And that also helps build the relationship, right? I think nowadays people care so much more about the people behind the business than just the product.
Right.
Like what's the mission? What's the mission? Who are you? How was this company started? What material is this? Right. I feel like that's only become a thing, right? In the recent few years, right? It's so much less about like the brand name and like what I can show off. And so much more about like, what is the cause that I'm supporting? And all of this stuff can be communicated in a webinar. And the major difference between a webinar and a traditional video, I know every business owner already uses video, especially if you're in e-commerce.
Right.
The major difference between a webinar and a video is people go to a webinar and expect to be able to engage with the content. So maybe there's like polls, questions, resources that you can take, but also be able to reach out to the host. Like to be able to ask a question. Whereas when you go to YouTube, like, that that's a one-way experience,
Yeah.
Right. You press play, you can pause it, you bounce, right? But why people like webinars is because it's more of a participatory two-way experience where I have a chance to reach out to someone and ask a question.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very true. And what really rings true with me, because I'm seeing this time and time again, not only with customers that I deal with in the e-commerce space, but myself, with regards to people these days really just care about who is behind that company. And I think, the webinar is a great way for business to really kind of share their story. Of course, they want to try to educate people around their product or product category, maybe use some kind of brief demos, go through the FAQs, like you said, but it's also an excellent way to get that direct live FaceTime, or even if it isn't live, that FaceTime interaction where they can actually tell about themselves. How did they birth the company? What's their mission? And you're hearing that really from the mouth of the founder, or somebody pretty high up in the company that can speak to the mission. Because I can just, I know for myself these days when I'm trying to purchase anything, maybe from a kind of a niche e-commerce site, one of the first things that I do is I go to that About Us. I'm just so curious about that owner and, okay, how did they come up with this product? Where did they get started? How long have they been around? What's their mission? Where do they source their products? All that type of thing. And so I know I'm not the only one.
Yeah. And I mean, like, well, I want to just differentiate when we say webinar. I mean, at least in this context, I think a lot of people think like a Zoom webinar, right? Like, while I think there's a place for that. Like, I think there is content that needs to be like timely, right? Yeah. It could be a certain launch, or maybe you're expecting a really big audience. Maybe you're an influencer, and that's where it really makes sense. But a lot of people don't have that audience, right? They don't have that influence. And maybe doing a one-time webinar isn't the best use of your time because, like you mentioned before, like there's lots of time into like promoting it, making sure people show up, getting ads, like maybe making sure the tech happens on, like everything goes smooth on the same day. Yeah. But what we do is we turn any video into a webinar experience so you can run it as many times as you want. And on the chat piece, what we do is we have an asynchronous chat where people can ask you a question through the eWebinar experience. If you're there, if you happen to be there, you can hop in to respond, just like any website, right? When you go to a website, it pops up, hey, Arlen, can I help you? If you're there, you can respond. But if you're not there and you respond later, they'll get an email. So even though the webinar is automated, you never miss a question from your customer. And that's what they love. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And as you mentioned about like being able to show your face, like there's something about showing your face behind the product. That's why you go to any Kickstarter video. Yeah. There's the founders talking about their story, why I made this. Hey, this is how it works. This is how we make it. This is the factory. Like people really feel connected to that, right? It's so much more than like a commercial where you're only seeing the product. And I kind of equate this situation to like infomercials. Like they've been playing for like when I was a kid, there was an infomercial channel that would play multiple products on repeat. Just to see someone talking about it, people can dial in, ask questions, you can buy it on the spot, right? They're demonstrating it to you, right? It's not really rehearsed, right? It's just there. Like that's like what the new webinar could be, I think nowadays. Exactly. It's so right. And I do recall that in my child as well, those webinar channels, a lot of times there were late night infomercials where, people were talking to the details of the product, demonstrating it, even fielding phone calls, actually. So, same type of thing. They were even doing that back in the day, getting live calls. People were asking about it. So, very, very powerful. Now, as far as the kind of the meat of these podcasts, you mentioned a couple things, of course. Low-hanging fruit would be going through the FAQs, sharing your story, how you got started, your mission, the things that you are you stand behind as far as maybe the sourcing of your products. But are there any other general rules of thumb, when it comes to coming up with the content and the format of it, whether it be a slide deck or you just do a talking head type video, custom graphics, or just something totally unique? What would you recommend for a business kind of just getting started into this? I mean, I think the most important thing is the content. Like the most important thing is a script. Right. Some people feel comfortable in front of the camera and they should do that. Right. But some people feel nervous about that. Yeah. So don't do that.
Right.
Because the delivery of that content is also very important. The delivery of that content is just as important as the actual content itself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So for me, like for my demo, because I'm in software, I have myself, a slide deck, and a talking head, in the corner.
Yeah.
I know some people aren't as comfortable in front of the camera, so they might have their intro as, a talking head, and then the rest of it is just the recording of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a mixture of two. Some people don't want to be on camera at all.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because you're at least getting that content out there. You can at least sound, enthusiastic. And I actually did a workshop before, which I can share in the show notes of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing they're show notes, right?
Oh yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah. So I can share that. So I made a workshop before on the 5 elements of an effective on-demand demonstration.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically like, how do you structure a presentation to get people to a close without talking to them? Because the thing is, everybody can sell one-on-one, right? You come into my store, or I talk to you on the phone, I can react to you, right? I know if you're happy, I know if you're upset, I know if you're frustrated, and I can react to that. But not everybody can sell knowing that you're not going to talk to the other person. That's actually a whole other art form.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you know that you have 15 minutes with someone to do a presentation, but you never get to answer their question, you never get to react to them, how would you structure your presentation differently?
Yeah.
So I did a workshop on that, and it's super simple.
Okay.
It's basically you have your agenda set. You tell them exactly what to expect in the next 15 minutes. You talk about the status quo and the competition, right? What is existing on the market that's a problem that induced you to start this company or build this product. And then you talk about the major features, but not the actual features itself. You talk about how these features have impacted somebody's life, right? By using this is how their life improved.
Okay.
And then you talk about some customer testimonials, some live cases, because people love that, right? The new sales is community driven. And then you just ask for the close. It's really that simple. But it brings people through the mindset of oh, okay, I do have that problem, right? As you're talking about the competition, I do have that problem. Oh yeah, this is my solution.
Yeah.
And then, oh yeah, I do need to buy this. And then that's when your buy button kind of pops up.
I got you. Yeah. So you're trying to cover the basis where you're thinking about what are some common things that people have, or common questions around your particular product that people have, and then you're just really answering them. Because I understand what you're saying. It's not like you're there in the store, you're on the phone with them one-on-one. You got to kind of
you have to address their objections before they come up.
Yeah.
This is the major difference between selling one-on-one and selling one-to-many, where you're just doing it through a video. Is how do I take away as much risk as possible? Right. How do I take away as many objections as possible by addressing them before they even come up? That's really the art of creating this presentation.
I understand that makes total sense. Now, the bottom line with presentations, with these webinars, with really any marketing strategy, is ultimately you want to use these vehicles to increase your sales, to increase your traffic to your site, your online store, your brick and mortar, whatever it is. That's the main thing. And so what would you say are some effective ways to promote the webinar once you get it out there and once you launch it, so that you will continually get a maximum turnout? If you're doing maybe you've scheduled it out, or you're doing it automated over and over again, the whole goal is you want more and more people to see it, because like you said, in the webinar, you're going to be responding to these objections and giving people reasons to purchase. So what would you say are some ways to really get it out there?
I mean, the most important thing is making it accessible.
Okay.
Right. But you can't do that if you're doing one live session, because if you're doing one live session, the promotion is very simple. It happens on December 15th. Everything you do goes to that particular date.
Yeah.
Right. You can send newsletters, you can get your, post in forums, Slack groups, you can do some ads, but everything's driving to that one date. And that's it. Right. If people go, that's great. If they don't, then you still got to do it. But the only way to get as many people into your webinar as possible is to automate it.
Yeah.
Because at that point, if it's running for a year, if it's running for 2 years, it doesn't matter if people show up on December 15th, right? They can show up on that. They can show up on the 16th, 17th. It doesn't really matter. Right. So once you use a software, whether it's eWebinar or something else, to automate your webinar, your website is the number one marketing channel you have, right? Everybody comes to your website. So you need to make sure that your sales pitch, or let's say it's your demo, right? I think people really get stuck on the fact that a demo is a demonstration of the product itself.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be. A demo is an introduction of your company and the problem that you're solving. It does. You don't even have to show the product at all. You can just show some photographs or some slides, right? Just to like whet people's appetite, right? So let's say you've got your demo webinar ready. Make sure it's on your header of your website. It's on the footer of your website. You've got a little pop-up that comes up. So we have widgets that you can install on your website. So as soon as you go to your website, there's a little thing that says, hey, join the next demo, or you can name it, whatever you want. So just make sure it's super accessible. And then there's so many places that you can, because it's happening all the time, the promotion of that webinar completely changes. You can have that on your business card. You can have that as QR codes on all of the ads that you have, right? You can have that in the signature of your email. All you want to do is make sure that that is front and center of every single piece of communication that you send out. Right. Every single newsletter that goes out, like every single newsletter doesn't all go to your customers. Some of them goes to your prospect. So you can make sure that that's embedded into every single newsletter. So we also have another article that I'll share in the show notes as well, which is 25 ways to promote your evergreen webinar. And some of these methods are already in there. But the really cool thing is, because it's always happening, you could just make that an asset that sits in all the other advertising assets that you already have that goes out. Right.
Yeah, very, very powerful stuff. I mean, I think it's, getting that exposure that you're already, because, you're already getting the traffic to the website. You're already getting your customers that are, in the flow. Maybe it's the notification emails, your transaction emails. There's so many touch points that you already have with customers and prospects, people that are joining your list. And so I get it. It's just, you really have to really announce these things front and center, and then continually have a flow where people that are joining the list or that are purchasing your products, everyone knows that, you have this webinar and it's on this day and this day and this day at this time. And so they know when they can access it, what's going to be covered. And, it's just there for them.
And because it's happening all the time, you can now embed it in some evergreen assets, right? You can look for blogs and ask them to, backlink to you. You can write a blog, right, on a similar topic and embed that webinar inside that blog. You can go to websites like Quora and answer questions and link to that webinar as this, as the answer to that question, right? There's just so many things that you can do now that it's something that is just perpetually going. Yeah, definitely.
Now, as we get ready to wrap things up, I wanted to see if you could highlight or mention some examples of some e-commerce businesses or some companies in general that you're familiar with that do consistent webinars and, they get a high turnout and that have really provided, true value to their end customers and their prospects.
Yeah. So there's a company called MagFast. It's like a battery company. It's, those external batteries, but their whole thing is it's so powerful that it can jumpstart a car.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
So, so it's called MagFast. And they actually just started shipping out the actual product. It's been, it's not Kickstarter, it's the other one, but let's say it's Kickstarter because I can't remember that name. Gotcha. But it's like a Kickstarter campaign product. And they have a Steve Jobs type webinar where, there's a big show. They talk about the battery, what the problem is. And it's like a 1 hour long webinar. Since they've started running it, I want to say it's been like 2-3 years. They've sold over $14 million worth of product only through webinars. They don't market through anything else. This is their only channel. And this webinar happens all day, every day. They buy Facebook ads. They're constantly targeting people. They're retargeting people. They're getting people to send out to their referrals, right? Like that whole thing. Their case study is actually on the customers page of our website. But that is like the number one case study of how an asset like an automated webinar can help you sell product without you there, but also be able to address customer concerns, because they can also ask questions throughout the experience and you can answer them, at your leisure as well.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's a huge testimonial, 14 million in sales over, a few years, strictly from what they're doing on webinars. Like you said, they're not doing any other type of advertising. So that really does speak volumes to the power of webinars. And, that they're a product company, they make a tangible, like you said, these are backup or devices and things that they send out, like ultimately a battery, which is demonstrable, and people have to get their hands on it. And so I definitely can see how that works and how that can make sense. And so really, there's a lot of power in these webinars.
Well, the thing is, I think a lot of business owners are already using video, so it's not that big of a leap.
Yeah,
right?
True.
Like what eWebinar is I think people hear the word webinar and it scares them.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, I've never done a webinar before.
Yeah.
Right. It's like public speaking, but that's the beauty of webinar automation.
Yeah.
Is that it's not public speaking. You have your best demo ever, your produced video, or it's just you, right? You can edit it. And then all you do is you upload the video.
Yeah.
And that becomes your webinar.
Yeah.
Right. And like, you don't care. It doesn't matter if no people show up because you're not there. Right. You don't have to kind of deal with that embarrassment and fear. Right. I think a lot of people are like, well, if I do a webinar, is anyone going to show up?
Yeah.
And then if I'm by myself, am I going to be able to handle the chat? And those are real issues.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's why we created the product. So if you're already using video to market and you believe in video, it's really not that big of a leap to take the exact same video and put it in eWebinar. Right. Because you still want the video in a YouTube because it gets you eyeballs. But in the comment of YouTube, you can put anything you want. And because the webinar is a better experience, because throughout the experience, you can also program in things like polls, questions, resources, contact forms to make it a fuller, more like participatory experience. You can, in the comments in YouTube, drive people back to your site. Right. Or drive people back to the webinar. And the reason you want to do that is because it builds a deeper relationship. And as they answer those polls and questions, you're actually gathering data from them.
Yeah.
Right. So you can ask things like, how did you hear about us? Right. Do you like this feature? Do you not like this feature? What do you wish we can do more of? Right. Do you have any questions for me? Right. And that's why it's a better experience. But don't think just because you put it in eWebinar, you can't put it in YouTube.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you can't put it on your website. You should actually be putting the same video in many different places because the way that people consume it and the mindset that they consume, depending on what medium, is different.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. A lot of people, I think that, okay, just because you put it out there in the webinar, vehicle, and you're promoting it that way, you can't use it anywhere else. You're like, okay, if we put it somewhere else, we put it on our YouTube channel, people aren't going to sign up for the webinar, but that doesn't matter. The whole goal.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
The whole goal is to really increase the amount of views that you're getting on it. You're trying to educate these people. You're trying to come against their objections and get them to buy your product. So I really get it. It makes a lot of sense. Well, this has definitely been a powerful segment here on the podcast, Melissa, because I've learned a lot, and I know our listeners have as well. I'm going to kind of, I got my wheels are turning in my head because we've used automated webinars internally in our company to kind of help educate and onboard some of our customers. And so I'm kind of already thinking of some things that our team kind of needs to get going on to kind of improve getting that out there more, and even exposing it to prospective customers. So I've definitely learned a lot myself personally. But lastly, before we do let you go, I always like to close things out with one kind of closing fun fact question. If you don't mind sharing one closing fun fact about yourself that you think our audience would be interested to know.
Yeah. So I have been a digital nomad for 4 years.
Okay.
The last home I had, I grew up in Canada, but the last home I had was in New York. And we decided that paying for rent in New York was not as fun as taking the same amount and just paying for Airbnbs like somewhere else in the world.
Okay.
So that started our journey 4 years ago, and we eventually found Amsterdam. We loved it. So now we have a home base there, but we mostly just travel. So as we're talking, I'm in Hong Kong right now.
Wow. Awesome. That's good stuff. I understand what you're saying as far as, paying rent or paying a mortgage in a specific place. It can get old. There is definitely a level of excitement to be able to do what you're doing, the digital nomad, and being able to just say, okay, for the next couple months, I want to go to Hong Kong. Maybe after that, we want to go to Spain or wherever you decide to go. There's definitely a lot of people that go on to do that because, you learn a lot. There's a lot to learn when you're in a different locale, different country, different people. So
it's just fun.
Yeah, exactly. The bottom line is it is fun for sure. Well, thank you for sharing that, Melissa. I appreciate that. Appreciate having you on as well. But lastly, before we do let you go, if you don't mind sharing the best way for our listeners and our viewers to get in touch with you if they want to pick your brain any more about webinars and eWebinars.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to get a hold of me is connect with me through LinkedIn. So my name is Melissa Kwan, Kwan. And if you're curious about eWebinar and how it can help you in your business, just go to ewebinar.com. There's a demo that you can join at your own time, of course, delivered through eWebinar as well. So a very meta experience. I'm always managing the chat. So if you have any questions about the product or my journey, whatever that might be, just type in the chat box and I'll be right there.
All right. That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Melissa. We appreciate having you on the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Are you looking to take your digital marketing to the next level but are tired of weeding through countless YouTube videos with unproven and untrusted marketing strategies? Well, we have the answer for you. The More Sales Every Month online digital marketing course. In this information-packed course, you will learn effective keyword research, link building, content marketing, and much more to attract and convert your site visitors into paying customers. Just go to moresaleseverymonth.com and sign up today for a low one-time fee. In addition to this power-packed course, if you would like to get access to a growing repository of digital marketing articles, PDFs, and ebooks, check out getosi.com/resources and opt in to get full access to our library of priceless marketing information to help you take your digital marketing to the next level.